Okay, today we will be talking about what Xi Jinping has been calling the once 100 years challenge, or once 100 year opportunity, whatever you want to call it. But instead of explaining what he actually means, which is very weak, I will be listing a whole list of historical events, and hopefully we can draw the same conclusion as Xi Jinping from the historical events that has happened in the last, say, some 40 years. First of all, I think the triggering event is this dissolution of the Soviet Union. It dissolved in 1991 on September 26. From that point onward, United States became the world's sole superpower. Previously, we had the so-called Cold War, and so we have at least two powers fighting for the dominance of the world. But when Soviet Union dissolved, what the world have left is only the America. So we have a sole superpower. And together with the dissolve, is actually a little bit more earlier. The Warsaw Pact also dissolved. That was about 6 months earlier, on the 1st of July. And that means when Warsaw Pact was organized, the West organized the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as a countermeasure to Warsaw. But as Warsaw has dissolved, NATO continues. We know that every organization, once it being organized, it has its own life. So NATO continues. At the very beginning, when USSR dissolved, then Russia we retained to be Russia again, and several presidents of Russia wanted to join the European Union, because after all they are thinking of themselves like the Europeans. But unfortunately, that has never happened. Russia wants to become a full member of the European Union, but unfortunately, the European Union only can offer them the European neighborhood policy, which is not equal partner in a way. So Russia refused. And then they come up with something called 4 common spaces for cooperation in different spheres. If we want to interpret these events, there is a theory, and that theory need to be proved by looking at different historical events to see whether this theory can explain the events that happened. So I'm putting forward one theory here. Other people may have other different theories to explain what happened in the last 30-40 years. I just put forward one theory, and then you can judge whether this theory is correct or not. The theory is that the United States is afraid of Russia joining the European Union because Russia has a lot of resources, both in terms of oil, natural gas, and other minerals. We know Russia is the world's largest landmass country. It has a lot of resources, both timber, natural gas, natural resources. And then in Europe, the major powerhouse is Germany, with a lot of industrial capability. So Germany and Russia is almost complementary. One has the energy, the resources. The other one has the technology and the means of production. So if Russia is able to join European Union, then European as a whole, the European Union, will be a massive political, economical, and industrial powerhouse that will offset the now sole power status of United States. So at the very beginning, United States has always trying to stop Russia becoming part of Europe. And Russia's several presidents, including Putin, at the beginning still think of itself as a European country. After all, Moscow is on the west side of Russia. It's not on the east side. The Russia eastern part is pretty rural, not much people there. Their main economic and political power is on the west side of Russia, which is considered as European. So I will put forward this theory here first, and then I will try to show you the historical events that happened after the collapse or the dissolution of the Soviet Union, to try to prove my point. And when one of the most important events in the dissolution of the Soviet Union is, of course, the reunification of Germany. During Cold War, we have the Eastern German and the Western German, and there's a war between that, the Berlin Wall, which is very famous. We remember, I think it's one of the U.S. President, Donald Reagan, he said, asked Gorbachev to pull down that wall. I remember that. So eventually, when the Soviet Union want to have moved into a different direction, one of the things is they negotiated with NATO, and at that time NATO promised that it will not expand east 1 inch. But unfortunately, that promise is not kept. And this diagram shows you the various stages of the European Union expanding into the east. And of course, we now know that there is a big issue with the Soviet-Ukraine war. We will touch upon that later today. But anyway, here we show you the different stages of the NATO expansion. It is enlarging, and now it's almost touching the Soviet Union, which I think Russia will feel a military threat. Now, another event much earlier is, of course, the Cuba Missile Crisis. We know that at that time, during Kennedy's time, NATO put up some missiles in Turkey. Soviet Union considered it a threat to its national security, and they managed to install missiles in Cuba. And then from United States point of view, missiles in Cuba is too close to its political, economic centers, that is Washington and New York. And we have the Cuba Missile Crisis. Eventually, both sides backed down, and Soviet Union removed the missiles from Cuba. And then about 6 months later, John F. Kennedy removed the missiles from Turkey. So the crisis is solved by rational mind and negotiation. But now we see that if Ukraine joins NATO, then it is almost putting missiles right next door to Russia, and Russia consider it as a national security issue. So that is another thing we need to take in mind when we discuss this later on. But anyway, we will continue to look at this issue later on. And then jump forward to 2001. We all know the 9/11 events happened in New York. But I don't know how many of you know that on that same day, it's not 2 buildings collapsed, it's actually 3 buildings that collapsed. Both the North Tower and South Tower, the 2 high ones, collapsed in the morning. But at around 5:30, a third building, Building 7, also collapsed, which is shown on the right side of the slide. This is Building 7 collapsing. So on that one day, 3 buildings collapsed, and I think it's about 3,000 something lives lost. American has the world's empathy. It was attacked by a terrorist attack. Everybody is supporting American, at least in these very sad moments. So let's see what Americans do immediately after that. Now, if we want to invade a country, how long it would take for the preparation time? When you make a decision to invade, how long it takes for the military to get prepared? Now, that is a question I would like you to consider, but I have no answer. But less than 1 month later, in October the 7th, the then U.S. President, George W. Bush, after September 11, George W. Bush demanded the Afghanistan government, the Taliban, to hand over Osama bin Laden, saying that Osama bin Laden was the people instigated the 9/11 attack. If Osama bin Laden is in Afghanistan, the normal procedure is to send a arrest request and then extradite Osama bin Laden to United States. But what if Osama bin Laden was not actually in Afghanistan? How can you hand over somebody you don't have? But anyway, Taliban asked for evidence that Osama bin Laden is involved in the attack. Unfortunately, United States produced none, and continuous demand of Taliban to provide the Osama bin Laden. Obviously, Afghanistan failed to do so. So Operation Enduring Freedom started invasion on October the 7th, less than 1 month after 9/11. U.S. military was very good in preparing for an invasion, and they did it within 1 month. Is that possible? That's up to you. And we know that this Afghanistan war lasted 20 years. It withdrew on the 30th of August 2021. And after the withdrawal, Taliban quickly returned to power. That means when the American gets in 21 years ago, they push away Taliban. But when they come back, Taliban is back. What is left in Afghanistan is a totally broken country. It is one of the poorest countries in the world at the moment. Now, that is not the only one. We will see some other examples what the Americans have done to other parts of the world. And then, on 20th March 2003, American invaded Iraq based on the accusation that Iraq have weapons of mass destruction. We all know that today none is found. Okay, we have never found any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq after the first Iraq War. Again, it is impossible to prove that I don't have weapons of mass destruction. You ask me to hand over weapons of mass destruction and I don't have that weapon, how can I hand over to you? Then you can still continue to argue, say, hey, you didn't hand over what you have. Well, how can I do that? Although United Nations weapon inspectors has been combing through Iraq for a number of years, they find nothing. But still, the United States accused Iraq with weapons of mass destruction and then started the invasion on 19th March 2003. Of course, later on we have another military intervention in 2011, in which Gaddafi was killed. So we have to ask several questions. These 3 wars, why? Why United States use an 9/11 attack event and initiate 3 wars? What is a possible theory behind it? Now, with my initial assumption or theory that United States want to remain the sole superpower in the world, then we need to look at who are the possible challenger to this superpower. Obviously, European Union is a potential candidate. But especially if European Union can leverage on Russia's resources. Another pillar of Americans' sole power is petrodollar. When oil is sold using US dollars, the world needs US dollars to buy energy. Where can they get the US dollars? Of course, selling stuff to American. And in other words, America is able to print money to get whatever it wants, as long as people still use US dollars to buy oil, which is a consumable. You buy it, you burn it, and then it's used up. And then you need another lump of US dollars to buy another batch of oil. This is an unending cycle of, and American can take advantage of this by just printing money. Print money, you get the US dollar, you take something valuable to exchange for that money, and then you use that money to buy oil, which will end up into the air, burns, nothing left. So when somebody suggested that their oil is not going to be sold in United States dollars, well, the Americans need to teach them a lesson. Iraq want to sell its oil in euros. And Gaddafi want to sell his oil in African dinars, which is a gold coin. If these two are successful, one of the pillars of American superpower will be weakened. So teach them a lesson. Kill both of them. So that is my theory to explain why taking use of the so-called war against terror as an excuse. United States invaded both Iraq and Libya. Of course, you will ask, why Afghanistan then? Well, Afghanistan is a main connection between Europe and Asia. Remember, we have a Himalaya lying just north of India. That means if you want to pass goods between Europe and Asia on land, Afghanistan is on a very key position. Another thing to look at, the U.S. military power is of course looking at its military expense. This is from 1990 to 2020. And this is in terms of, on the left-hand side is in terms of billions of US dollars. On the right-hand side is in terms of GDP, which is written there. Okay, the Russia or USSR spent about 4.26% of GDP. China 1.74%, and United States about 3.74%. But in terms of absolute value, United States on the right, and the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the next 8 country on the left. United States overspent the next 8 largest spender in military. The second largest is of course China, and then India. Russia, interestingly, is only number 5. The world is also steadily changing economically. In 2004, China is still number 5 in terms of GDP. We know China has very fast moving forward in terms of economy. So by 2009, China is looking to overtake Japan, becomes the world's second largest economy. Remember this date, 2009, which is a very important time in our world history. Pivot to Asia. Anyone remember? Yes? Sorry. Anyone remember when that happened? It's on the November 2011. Obama visited our parliament, and it is the first time he announced to the world this American idea of pivot to Asia. It consists of 2 parts. One part is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Of course, he also have the Transatlantic Partnership, but here we are interested in our part of the world. Okay, so we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is the one part, and these are the countries involved in the TPP. We have Japan, Vietnam, Brunei, Singapore, of course, Australia, New Zealand, and then on the west coast of South America, we have Peru and Chile, Mexico, and then of course Canada and United States. Who is missing here? The largest trading partner of the world, China. China's not there. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. This TPP doesn't include the world's largest trading partner. In response, China have this regional cooperation economic partnership, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, which is operational in 2020. This involves these countries. So we look at the other part of the pivot to Asia. Is about United States military. The original plan is put about 2/3 of Americans' naval power into the Pacific. So once China knows about that, they will start thinking, Americans putting 2/3 as power in the Pacific region. Who is the enemy? Who is the assumed enemy? Well, of course we have Canada there, but Canada is basically an ally to American. It's not a problem. Okay? In terms of Asia, we have Japan, which is just an island, small island with American bases there, and then Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. None of them has any military power which can rival 2/3 of American power. The only one is obviously China. So the Chinese leadership realized as its GDP is approaching the world's second largest economy, American assumed China to be a challenger. American is now trying to contain China. Again, that fit in our original assumption, our original theory. American want to remain as the sole power in the world, the only superpower. Any challenger has to be nipped off at the butt before it becomes a challenger. And therefore, by 2011, American started a whole campaign. It used the pivot of Asia to organize trading and military encroachment on China. At the same time, we start hearing all the human rights violations from China. The honeymoon between United States and China ended. We now have all the Western media talking about the South China Sea, the human rights violation in Tibet, in Xinjiang, etc., etc. They all started around 2010 and 2011. These are the military bases. People argue why China is so close to the United States bases. A geography problem. China can't move, can't get away. These are the bases, and these are public information. China started to call this as island chains. The first island chain started from Japan, South Korea, the runaway province, Taiwan, and then Philippines, and then of course Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam. So if China wants to move its goods to the rest of the world by sea, It had to break through the first island chain. Of course, when there's no war, that's not a problem. But if there is a conflict between China and United States, China will not get its needed resources by sea. Another crucial choke point is that most of the energy China needs comes from Middle East. And if it comes from Middle East, you want to use pipes, you need to go through Afghanistan, which is controlled by United States at that time, or by sea through the Malacca Strait, the star mark at Malaysia there. At the tip of that Malaysian peninsula, we have Singapore, which is the largest military base in Asia. So with a navy blockading Malacca Strait, China won't be able to import oil from Middle East and then pass through the first island chain. So China needs to start thinking, what can I do? United States is now treating me as its enemy. In terms of trade, they started a TPP, which I am not involved. In terms of military, I am surrounded. I need my oil. My oil needs to come from the sea. And the choke point is Malacca Strait at Singapore. And Singapore can just stop using military force from any oil tanker passing through Malacca Strait. China is stuck. So for any reasonable country, you need to consider national security, and that is a national security threat to China. Okay, after analyzing the geopolitical situation, let's look at economics. This is America's national debt. It has kept on rising and rising. But at around March 2020, the slope changed. It is making more debt at a much higher rate. Of course, when you have a debt, you have a creditor. So, if American government is issuing debts and the creditors are Americans, oh, that's their problem. It is within America. They solve it themselves. We don't care. So, in terms of international politics, international finance, we have to look at this huge, now is 31 trillion, okay? This huge American national debt is owned to whom? If all this is to American, we don't care. Unfortunately, America owns that money to the rest of the world. This is their trade balance. The blue part, which is the services, America has been in surplus. But for the other parts, the goods, it has always been in deficit, at least since 1922. That means when American trade with the rest of the world, it is negative. That means it is buying more stuff than making more stuff and selling to somebody else. And that's why the world is flooded with US dollars. Because as a whole, everybody trade with United States and use the United States money to buy oil. So if American is not flowing out, the having sufficient American dollars flowing out, then we don't have the US dollars to buy oil. So that is also linked to the petrodollars idea. We see that Americans have been printing. And this printing means American is able to create debts and use that money to enrich itself. Unfortunately, American isn't distributing that wealth among its citizens very well. That's something else. Besides money, we also have to look at our world population. The fertility rate has been declining. It's declining and declining and declining. This is a map. We always say, oh, China is a big problem. Its birth rate is declining. Yes. Compared with India, yes. But if we compare China with the developed world, it's not that bad. China's birth rate is about the same as Europe, America, Australia here, Russia, and a number of Western countries like Spain, Germany, etc. The situation is actually worse. Of course, the world's population growth is in Africa, which is shown in brown, orange, and yellow. So the world also has another problem. Those with production capability, the West, China, or with resources, Russia, Middle East, the birth rate is declining. Whereas the poor country, especially Africans, the human population is increasing. As I said, American implemented the containment policy of China at around 2011. It continues with trade war started by Trump, and then technology wars continue with Biden. We have the military encirclement of China. We have a lot about Taiwan as a security risk. So maybe Americans are also thinking using Taiwan as the equivalent of Ukraine today. Continues the deframing of China. I call it manufactured human issues because there are just none. And we now can be quite sure that United States views China as a main competitor and challenger for its sole superpower status in the world. Now, if America is able to accept the status of the second superpower, I don't think the world will be this difficult today. But unfortunately, we always hear Americans talk about American first. America is the greatest country in the world. America is to lead the world. American exceptionalism. But the moral question is, why must China remain at the low end of the manufacturing? Why can't China move up the value chain? We are all human. If China wants to move up its value chain, its economy is going to grow. China has about 4.3 times the population of United States. So even when China's GDP overtakes Americans, on average, on a per capita calculation, China is still only 1/4 the wealth of Americans. Everybody aspire to become rich, healthy, and have a better life. So why can't Chinese? So if Chinese GDP catch up to about half of Americans' GDP per capita, its GDP will be twice as large as American. And of course, with GDP increase, it will also have significant influence on geopolitical influence. China's geopolitical influence bound to increase as its economy improves. The next risk is, of course, a military conflict between China. I put it between the West and China because the West follow Americans very closely. So I will just lump them together as the West. Another big challenge here is, in the past, wherever a country becomes rich or wealthy, we have an assumption is that the government must be democratic and free. If we want to call China's political system as authoritarian, it is not the same as democracy. But China is getting rich. It offers an alternate development model, especially to the developing worlds. I think all developing worlds also aspire to become at least a middle income country. They don't want to be permanently poor. Nobody wants to be poor. Nobody wants to be hungry. Nobody wants to have poor health system. In the past, we have this understanding or this assumed development model. Free trade, democracy, freedom of speech, etc., etc. But now we have another country moving up very fast. The fastest development in human history. Within 40 years, China is now standing next to the sole power. It offers another alternate model, an alternate ideological model. China talk about socialism. It's not capitalism. Therefore, socialism becomes a potential ideological competitor to capitalism plus democracy. China also promotes international order based on UN charters. We heard Americans say, oh, China is breaking rule-based international order. What does that mean? What is rule-based international order? Well, China say, we recognize the UN charters, and that is the international order we should follow. Not some arbitrary rules dictated by United States. If China wants to continue with its development, of course it has to protect its interests and at the same time help the developing country to grow. If developing countries can move from the current poor status into middle income, their demand in goods will increase. So the best way to make the cake bigger is improve the livelihoods of the developing countries. But in the past, we have the IMF, the World Bank, And it seems they are incapable of making the Americans, the Africans to be a bit richer. No, they don't. They can't. They haven't. It's after the Second World War till now, 70 years. The Africans are still very poor. So China also started its own investment through the BRICS country, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank. China is the major stakeholder in both of these. But one interesting observation is that in IMF and World Bank, the stake of United States is now less than 20%. But Americans still hold the veto rights. Whereas in BRICS and Asia Infrastructure Development Bank, China's stake is also over 20%, but China do not have veto power. China has now organized a much fair and just organization compared with IMF or World Bank, and actually with UN as well. China is one permanent member of the Security Council. There are all 5 permanent members of in the Security Council which have veto rights. Look at the membership. One is China. The other one, America, about 5% of the world. Britain, even smaller. France, even smaller. And Russia. In terms of population, China alone has larger population than the other 4 members in the Security Council. And UN General Assembly do not have enforcement rights. Only the Security Council has. And the West, if you include Russia, is 4-1. In terms of trade, even with the trade war started with Trump, Chinese trade still increasing at about 10% per year at the moment. In terms of innovations, we measure scientific publications. China has overtaken America by 2017. So although America is trying to contain China in terms of trade, in terms of military, in terms of access to everybody else, everything else, technology war, but Chinese are now pushing ahead in terms of innovation. China is, of course, is also the world's largest manufacturing. So almost everything is made in China. Okay. It overtakes America as the largest manufacturing as well. And then come the 21st century. And then in the last couple of years, just 3 or 4 years, we have 2 black swan events. COVID and Russia-Ukraine war. We have the largest population countries are China and India. But the largest death toll is not from China or India, although both are poorer than American. American has the largest death toll. Interesting, isn't it? Supposed to be one of the most advanced countries in the world. But in terms of COVID, its performance is very, very poor. And during COVID, almost every country have stimulus package, including us. What does it mean? Now, originally, if you give people more money, people spend it. The spending will be used to put up local economy, and the government can tax more because the economy is better and compensate for the package. But unfortunately, for the West, when people spend money at lockdown, what they can do? Buy stuff. Okay, these stuff are not made locally; they are made in China. So, for example, white goods, we see that during our COVID time, almost everything becomes more expensive. Why? Oh, because it's inflation. This source of inflation comes from oversupply of money. The currency expansion leads to inflation. The same amount of stuff, you have more money representing that stuff, of course, it will cost more. Then the central bank finds that, oh, we have inflation, we have to stop the inflation, make the economy back to normal. So, what tools they have? Increase interest rate. Interest rate increase, it is a squeeze on everybody else. For those who have mortgages, they have to put in more money for their loans. For our common folks like us, we may not have a mortgage, but our daily expenses increase, all due to this increase in interest, because business need money, and when they need money, they have to pay interest. When interest higher, their profit margin lower, and then they have to increase their profit margin by increasing the price. The increase in interest does not address the original problem, is the oversupply of money. Of course, this oversupply of money can be compensated through time, because as our economy expands, if our supply of money remain the same, then we will catch up. We have to catch it up through economic expansion, not by increasing interest rate. But unfortunately, all central banks using the same tactic, increase interest. Another thing is, of course, we face with another hit on our economy, which is Russia and Ukraine war. That's one part. And the other part is the issue of long COVID is now getting more severe. We now know that about 10% of people with COVID may develop long COVID. That means we have a potential of reduction in workforce due to long COVID, and at the same time an increased demand on our health system. So we have the birth rate of developed country lowering. Of course, the developed country here, we have to include China as well. We will have a reduced workforce, and reduced workforce means reduced consumption. The world's economy is not looking good in the next decade or so. The second black swan effect is, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, we are not going to analyze why. We are just looking at the impact of this. Here's the countries that have imposed sanctions on Russia. Basically, it's only the West. The rest of the world, including China, India, Africans, South Americans, etc., don't impose any restriction on Russia. All the sanctions origin are Japan. It is not exactly the West, but it is almost the West. Okay, and Australia, not even New Zealand. What's the consequence of this sanction? You cut off a trading partner, Russia, and this trading partner has resource. You cut it off. Of course, you can buy your resource from other body other than Russia, but that will involve increase the price. We see our gas at the pump. Before the war, we sit around at $1.50. Now it's about $2. And it has higher price in terms of the resources, energy in particular, and the price is also more volatile. For the Europeans, not only they cannot get the piped LPG, piped gas, they have to ship it from across the ocean. Of course, they can get some gas from Africa as well, and some from Middle East. But anyway, this gas will not be shipped by the most efficient method, which is the pipe. Russia is also the world's largest producer, one of the largest producers of fertilizer and wheat. So, another two essential ingredients the world is under sanctions. For Russia, we know that the West have frozen its assets. That means any people paying in euros or US dollars, the Russia is not going to get it because it will be frozen by the West. So Russia moved the trade away from euros and dollars. Now remember we talked about petrodollars as one of the strengths which supports the US soft power status. When people move away from the dollar, it is weakening United States' position as a superpower. Another important thing is other countries start to evaluate its relationship with the West. If the West can apply sanctions to Russia, what stopped the West from applying sanctions to me? If the West can apply sanctions on China, what stopped the West to apply sanctions on me? So they had to think about that. The government had to think about that. Remember, talk about Germany as one of the main industrial power in Europe. It was based on cheap energy from Russia. The energy is shipped to Germany through the Nord Stream pipes. We now know that the Nord Stream pipes has been sabotaged and is now not operational. That means Germany will not have cheap Russian gas or Russian energy. They have to ship it from across the Atlantic. In that sense, the industries within Germany will have to use very expensive energy, and therefore its energy-intensive industry had to find another place to operate their machinery, move away from Germany, maybe to United States, to Asia, to India, to China. So what will be the employment in Germany? Not looking good. These large companies making stuff is going to move away because the energy price is just too expensive. There is a deindustrialization of Europe happening. In terms of military, the war between Russia and Ukraine, we call it a proxy war. It's actually Russia against the West, because Ukraine is getting all its military supply from the West, NATO, United States. We know that the total military support has already exceeded $100 billion. Ukraine has already lost about 20% of its land. And it looks that almost all the military hardware in Ukraine are exhausted. The West is not able to manufacture sufficient military equipment to support fighting just Russia. What are the chances of fighting against China? In any war, the first contact will exhaust everybody's hardware. Then the war continues, and it depends on the industrial capability of the involved countries. I am able to make the weapon faster, more abundant than you, I win the war. It's a competition between industrial abilities. Looks like the West has showed the rest of the world that it is a paper tiger. It looks very good on paper, but just to fight against Russia, its hardware is exhausted at such a rate that it will not be able to replenish. In terms of politics, in the book of the Great Chessboard, Beninsky talked about Europe and Asia as the center of the world. And of course, we know that the center has shifted to Europe in the last 300 years. But it is now gradually shifting back to the east. And if Russia, Iran, and China to become allies, then it will be a formidable geopolitical power. What happened because United States don't want European Union to overtake itself, so it stopped Russia to become a European country, pushing Russia towards the east. In the long run, it is against their national interest. The war actually pushes Russia closer to China. And because of the sanction, Russia is kicked away from the SWIFT, which is a interbanking messaging system. It is also called the financial nuclear bomb. So Russian banks is not able to balance their interbank money exchange through the SWIFT. The only alternative is build your own. So Russia had to build its own global financial system to replace SWIFT and other damaging blow on the Americans' superpower status. Now, any country, if that currency becomes the international reserve currency, that means people want to hold your money in their bank, then you have to supply the world with that currency. You end up having a trade deficit. When you can use your money as a reserve currency, you don't have to work hard. You just print money, and then you get what you want by your printed money. That has a tendency of changing the economy from a producing economy into a consuming economy. You can only be a consuming economy if your currency is a global reserve currency, which Americans has enjoyed for the last 50 to 40 years. But we all know that all good times will end somewhere. And the world is looking at American dollars as now just paper. Unfortunately, I'm still holding a lot of this paper. So before that US dollars become paper, I want to spend it to get the maximum value. But at the meantime, the trend is coming. Countries are starting to trade using mutual currencies. Why use United States dollars if I can use my own currency, if I can print my money? Of course, we talk about the trade organizations, where the TPP represented by the blue circle, we have the RCEP represented by the red circle, and there's only a number of common countries in between. And then in terms of population, RCEP has China and India. That represent about half the world. In terms of GDP, on the other side, TPP, of course, is still larger because you have the United States there, one of the largest economy. But at the same time, the BRICS countries are expanding, and the other country with another organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, also expanding. China has just a very frequent interactions with Middle East. Xi Jinping visited Saudi Arabia last year, December, his last trip. And then Iran's president just visited China about 2 weeks ago. And during the visit, Xi Jinping invited Saudi Arabia to sell its oil in Shanghai's exchange using renminbi. Will OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, start selling oil in Shanghai exchange using renminbi? If that's happened, will United States invade Saudi Arabia just like United States invaded Iraq and Libya? We don't know. In terms of the world's most sanctioned countries, Iran was one of those, but now it's overtaken by Russia. Russia is the world's most sanctioned country at the moment. All these sanctioned countries will gather together and form a bloc. Russia, Iran, Syria, North Korea, Venezuela, Myanmar, Cuba, etc. So I think we will have to observe two global trends. I don't have the answer. I don't know whether these two trends will become the future world situation. But one is the unipolar world versus multipolar world. That means, can America maintain its position as the world's only superpower? We don't know. America will fight to the last breath to defend that position. And if that becomes a fight using military, we are in big trouble. The other is, of course, globalization versus nationalism. Will the world stop being a globalized world where everybody can exchange their goods into something similar to Cold War? With the USSR, they have a trade system. Outside that, we have another trade system. Of course, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have the globalization. But will we look back to that situation? The rest versus the West, we don't know. So I will leave here and then accept questions. So anybody want to ask me questions, you are welcome to do so. Anyone? Any question?
It's strange that China is dealing with both Saudi Arabia and Iran, because they're quite big enemies, aren't they?
In politics, there's no permanent enemy. There's only permanent what's that called? Interest.
Yeah, yeah.
So China is trying to increase its geopolitical abilities through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And how do you consider? I mean, China is. I mean, we sort of consider China's the population as being totally ruled by one dictator.
Yeah.
And no freedom. But I mean, I don't believe that. But what is the difference in freedom between America and China, would you say, of the population?
We have to define what it means by freedom first. If you say freedom is ability to do whatever you want, for example, then China isn't a country like that. But if you say, I want freedom of safety, China is very safe. And you want to say, I want freedom to be a middle class. I don't have to be struggling with my daily life. China is moving into a middle class. People are having better life every day. A freedom from debts. So when you talk about freedom, we have to look at it in a Eastern concept rather than a solely Western concept.
Sure.
Western concept is very much a almost absolute freedom. I can do whatever I like.
Yeah, but that's okay if you've got a benevolent leader. So
Yes.
let's say Xi Jinping is benevolent, has good intentions.
Yeah.
But if he was like a Hitler or something, and the people don't have freedom, that could be a potential problem.
Yes, absolutely agree with that one. So everything has its good and bad. Okay. Now, for example, at the moment, when we in our countries, for example, we have the so-called democracy. But look at the policy. Take NBN as an example. When the Labour talk about NBN, they were talking optical fiber into the house.
Yeah.
But once they lost their control of the government. They changed. And so the policy becomes one step forward, one step backward, one step forward, one step backward. But if you have a sole party, as I said last time, that party is responsible, then China can implement 5 years plan, 10 years plan, 30 years plan, and this plan will be executed. So it move forward. Of course, with the caveat that what if the leader is not working for the people, is working for himself?
Yes.
That is a huge risk. We all understand. But that doesn't mean we don't have the risk as well. We have the same risk. Remember, Hitler was also elected.
That's superannuation. It's under attack from Labour again.
Sorry?
Sorry, that was my husband. He was saying our superannuation is attacked from Labour. So there's much going on. But I wanted to just say two things. You didn't talk a great deal about India, who is also rising up. And the other thing also, it is what the other gentleman said, is covered very much by the leaders of the country too.
Yeah.
Ying and Putin and wherever. They have a great input into the way things go on, as George Bush had with going into Iraq and wherever, and Tony Blair and the others, and John Howard. So the question is, India's there on the sidelines, and also we have the difficulty of the main leaders of the countries.
Yeah. Now, India's economy has been improving during Modi. Okay, that's true. But India has also a huge internal problem as well. Its caste system is one issue. Another is it is still not united in terms of language. The English language is only available to the educated. It's not throughout the country. So in terms of long-term development, India has a number of social issues they have to overcome. If they can overcome these social issues, there's no reason why India cannot be one of the world's leading power. So if we say there will be multipolar world, we will be talking about one Western power bloc, okay, led by either European Union or America. Or even if they split, we have the European as a power bloc, the Americans, the Northern America as a power bloc. That's totally acceptable. And then we may have China as a power bloc, and then our Asian friends in the Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. form another power bloc. And then on the other side, we have the Middle East, the oil-producing country as a power bloc, and then India, another power bloc. Then this is what we are talking about, multipolar world, rather than at the moment a single polar world. So I will be looking forward to a multipolar world. I think a multipolar world with power balancing each other will be much more stable than the current single sole power, because American basically can do whatever it likes. For example, we heard from Seymour Hersh that Biden and Americans' Secret Service blow up the Nord Stream. Okay, of course it is just a report. We have no evidence, but American has the ability, has the motivation. Biden has publicly claimed that if Russia invade Ukraine, it will blow up the Nord Stream. This is a threat Americans have laid out, and he has executed it. So I'm quite confident that the Nord Stream is blown up by the Americans. But what can we do? Can we take Biden to the International War Crime Commission. No, we can't. We can't do that. We can do nothing about it because there's no balance of power. They can do whatever they like. But if we're moving into a multipolar world, maybe the political leaders will have to be responsible in some sense. Of course, it's just maybe. We don't know.
The Americans is not part of the treaty. Okay, therefore you can't say anything against the American.
Yes, that's another issue. He just doesn't care. It does whatever you like.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Oh, sorry.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you what you think of Jinping and Putin?
Sorry again?
Can I ask you what you think of Jinping and Putin?
India and Putin.
No. What do you think of the character of Jinping and Putin?
Oh, you mean Xi Jinping?
Xi Jinping.
Yes.
Xi Jinping, their personal character. Okay.
And Putin.
And Putin. Okay. I'm not too familiar with Putin, but I have followed with Xi Jinping's life. Xi Jinping is born as a royal, I'll put it that way. His father is a comrade with Mao Zedong. Okay, so Xi Jinping is born a prince. Okay, if we want to call it that way, that means his family, at least his father, is in the Chinese political upper layer. But during the Cultural Revolution, his father fell out from favor from Mao. So Xi Jinping spent his teenage years in poor country in China. He sleep with the farmers, work with the farmers during that 10 years of Cultural Revolution. Okay. That is his youth. Then came the death of Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao. Then Deng Xiaoping come up and then reverse the persecution of Xi Jinping's father. Then Xi Jinping's father was assigned to Guangdong, the province next to Hong Kong, and proposed to have a special economic zone built right next to Hong Kong as a village called Shenzhen. Now today Shenzhen is well known as one of the main innovation cities right next to Hong Kong. But it was Xi Jinping's father at that time proposed that the country want to move forward economically, we need every help from the world. At that time, Hong Kong's GDP represent about 25% of China's GDP. So, building a city next to Hong Kong to attract the money and expertise from Hong Kong to invest in Shenzhen was very attractive. At that time, Xi Jinping then leave his village in the western part of China and go to Tsinghua University and do his PhD. Xi Jinping is a chemical engineer. After getting his PhD, he worked as a personal secretary to his father's subordinate. But now the subordinate has become China's military chief. So he works as a personal secretary for about 3 years. Then, at the suggestion of Xi Jinping's mother. He started from the bottom up. He go back to the West in a village and becomes a village secretary. And from that, he works his way up. Village secretary, and then the province, from the province to major province, and then to Shanghai, and then into the Central Bureau, and then into the Central Standing Committee, and then eventually take his place in, becomes the leaders. Now, in terms of his character, he is like a bamboo. That means when the winds come, he will bend down. But once the wind is gone, he will come up again. He is a bamboo. He is a very persistent. He knows what he wants. Under pressure, he might bend. Then, when the pressure is gone, opportunity come back up again. And that is Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is a very determined leader. And he also knows that if he wants to have the support of the party, he must have the support of the people. After all, let me finish first. After all, the Chinese Communist Party of China has almost 100 million members. They are from every level of Chinese government. So if he is doing well for the people, he will get the support from the CPC, which in turn becomes his political power. So from what I can see, Xi Jinping is a person with very sharp focus on what he wants to achieve. And he will get what he wants eventually. Sorry, your question, please?
Albert, what do you think of Xi Jinping's current treatment of their billionaires who seem to be disappearing at a rate of knots? Does he see them as a threat to nationalism or to his power? Or is there another move that he's doing?
There's a very different ideology between the West and China. Okay, in the West here, it seems that our government is controlled by big money interests. But in China, government controls the big money.
But why are so many of them disappearing or being jailed or?
They'll be taxed.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Okay. Now there are two issues here. One is the government will not let the capital to run the country. So there's a very interesting effect here. When a company grows to a certain size, the government will come in and say, I want to buy a certain amount of your stock to hold on to that company. So in here, we talk about privatization. But in China, we talk about the other way around. When you are successful, the company will come in, the government will come in and say, well, you are so successful. I will help you to be more successful, but I will have to have a certain amount of your stock.
And they don't want it.
Okay, two-way. Okay, now, a lot of billionaires, up to a certain point, they started to go into politics.
Yeah.
Because after all, you want to make really big money, you have to be political. And that is where the risk comes in. For all those billionaires who just strictly in terms of finance, it won't disappear. Okay? But anyone who tries to step into the political arena, then it is a risky step. And the government sometimes will make you disappear for a period of time. Okay? Not usually about 3 months, then you'll be free. And that is called re-education. The government will talk to you explaining its policy and then trying to make sure you understand Chinese policy and then convince you to follow the government's policy. So billionaires do disappear, but usually for a short time. But the another group which has been targeted by the government is so-called the influencers, like me. I'm so-called KOL, key opinion leaders. Okay, these are influencers who has huge followers, have huge influence on people. Typically, will be our movie stars or singers, and we know that movie stars and singers make a lot of money in the West here. One movie, the lead artist, maybe actor, actress, may represent about 80% of the whole budget of the movie. But China said, no, you can't do that. It forces a maximum percentage of budget on one actor to make it a bit fair. So that's one thing. And if the actor represent a product, this is the way a lot of influencers make money. I'm the split person of Nike or whatever, okay? Then, if you do something not legal, for example, taking drugs, then the government will chase after you and ban you from acting and cut you off, because the government do not want the young people to follow bad example. So that is another group have to be very careful in China. If you are an influencer, especially when you have a lot of followers, then you better behave, because China doesn't want the young people following bad examples. Bad, of course, is a moral judgment call. So we may call it good or bad, but not necessarily according to the Chinese government. But we Chinese have a very common moral standard following the Confucian ideas. So as long as you are within the Confucian ideology, Confucian philosophy, we are all good. When you are stepping outside that traditional values, then in China you better take care. So in one way, it's not as free as we are here. But on the other way, we have something back. For example, we have a safe environment. The government is looking after you, and our neighbors are friendly. We know everybody in a small neighborhood, etc. There's another kind of values. For example, in a lot of the Chinese government family, they don't even lock their door. They don't need to. They know each other in the village. The ladies are dancing in the open playground in the village. Everybody coming in, this dancing lady knows who's coming in, who's go out. It's a very safe environment.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Any more questions? Okay, if no more, then we will finish today, and thank you for your attention. And then next week we will be on the 5-year plan formulated last November. So we will talk about the development in the next 5 years in China. What are the top level design, at least what the government want to achieve in the next 5 years. So that will be our next time. Okay.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you. See you there next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very interesting.